Welcome to the Behind the Bits podcast. Your host, Scott Curtis, wants to learn everything he can about stand-up comedy and take you along for the ride. Scott and his guests talk serious about comedy in every episode. Behind the Bits will uncover knowledge from different perspectives on subjects such as writing and performing stand-up comedy, as well as booking shows and the comedy life. If you're thinking about becoming a stand-up comic, already in the comic game, or a comedy nerd, Behind the Bits is the show for you. Now, let's get Behind the Bits.
Okay.
All right. Welcome back to the Behind the Bits podcast. I'm still Scott Curtis, and I've got Mark Masters with me here today. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing great, Scott. Thanks for having me.
I got to tell you, I'm really glad I jumped on Reddit when I did, because that was the only way I was going to find you. And I found you. I immediately bought your audiobook for Not Good Yet. I'm holding it up here for you so you can see your own book. And then you sent me the print copy because I like the audiobook so much, but I couldn't keep rewinding and finding all the stuff that I wanted to highlight. So I got that, and I've marked it up pretty good. And I was absolutely blown away by your book, and I wanted so much to have this when I first started doing stand-up. I think that every comedy club should just buy a box of these, and when they do a open mic, they should just give them to the open micers, and it'll alleviate like 80% of their problems. So it was inspirational. Everything was, this was about the perfect book for a new comic to read.
Oh, that's great to hear. That was one of my goals, was to make it easier for comics to decide if they wanted to pursue stand-up comedy and what to do as they're beginning. So that's awesome. That's high praise. Thanks a lot, Scott.
Yeah, it just clicks so many boxes for me. And, having been doing this for 5 years, and I would say I probably put a good solid year and a half of actual work into that 5 years. I didn't do your marathon thing, but it's been an off and on thing for me. Everything you said was just right. It was just, I've experienced it all. I've seen it. I've made the mistakes that you can make, and it was just absolutely the best thing in the world. So I just wish I would have read it before I started doing the open mics, because I would have been so much better at it.
Yeah, there are not a ton of original ideas in there. There are things that people have experienced over the decades as open micers. Just, I'm not sure a lot of people have gone to the trouble of writing them down.
Right.
And one of the things that's fun for me is I'm approaching 2 years in comedy. That book is about my first 6 months and first 100 open mics. It's fun to realize that I could not write that book now. I'm a totally different person and comedian than I was a year and a half ago when I started writing the book about my first 6 months. You change so much in the beginning as a comedian. It's cool that I have a snap. It's also embarrassing. It's embarrassing and cool to have a snapshot of where I was 6 months in. And I hope it helps other comics.
Yeah, I am just in 100% agreement that after 2 years you're a totally different person as a comic, and you change as a person too. But I was just I just read it, and I was like, this has got the perfect amount of, okay, this is what you do, this is your checklist, this is how you act, this is when you show up, along with enough personal stories in there to understand, okay, this is where Mark had a bad one, and this is where Mark had a good one. And it was so easy to listen to. And then I read through it again. It was just one of those things that the listen was probably 2 or 3 sessions because I drive a lot, and reading it through, I think I read it through in 2 nights again. So, it was just.
Did you listen to it on Audible, or how did you get it?
Yeah, I did Audible.
Okay.
And you
It's
narrate your own Audible
platforms for the listeners. And the print version you can get in local bookstores around Colorado or on Amazon, or you can contact me and I'll probably mail you one if you're nice.
Right. And I'm going to make sure that the show notes have links for this too, so that they can get the book as well. Just a great book. So let's talk about how it all came about, because sure. You are not a born stand-up comic. No. You didn't start super early in life. No. So without giving the whole book away, why?
Yeah, well, I've always, like a lot of aspiring stand-up comics, I've always enjoyed stand-up comedy. Mm-hmm. I grew up on watching stand-up comedy and listening to cassette tapes of stand-up comedy. And that
ages you right there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm an older guy. I'm in my 40s, for those of you who are just listening to me and haven't seen my picture before. So I'm a little different around the open mic scenes. Most people are half my age, which is an advantage in some ways in comedy, because I have a lot of life experience, a lot of stories I can draw upon, which is exciting. But basically, I was like a lot of starting comedians. It was a New Year's resolution for me. It took me about 6 months to get around to. I decided at the end of one year, I wanted to do some fun and exciting things the next year, and one of them was to do an open mic. Mm-hmm. For stand-up comedy. I'd been to a few open mics over 2 decades, mostly in Los Angeles, just kind of curious about how comedy works behind the scenes. And I thought I could give it a try. And it was not great, my first open mic, and it was very scary, as many people can relate to. I have friends who have reached out to me since who want to do an open mic, and I'm like, no problem. You name the day of the week, I'll meet you. I'll make sure it's easy for you. And then like 3-4 weeks will go by and they're like, you know what? I'm not going to do it. Never mind. I changed my mind. Yeah. So it's a little, I write about this in the book, but I remember about a week before I did my first open mic, I went to an open mic to watch it in Denver. This was at Three Kings, a Friday afternoon mic. And I was like literally sick to my stomach watching the other comedians. Like if they did well, I felt bad because I was like, I could never be that funny. And if they did poorly, I felt bad because I thought that's going to be me in about a week. Uh-huh. And it made me physically sick to my stomach while I was standing there. And I think of that every time I go to that mic. Nathan Lund, who's a terrific comedian in Denver, runs that open mic. And I every time I'm there, and now I have a little bit more confidence and generally don't feel nervous going up at that mic. But it's one of the scarier mics in Denver in the sense that there's just, not always a very receptive audience at that open mic. So it's a little scary. Yeah.
When you were listening to those cassettes, who did you listen to that really got you interested and said, hey, I want to do that?
Yeah, well, what's funny is probably the most influential cassettes were Monty Python cassettes, which aren't even really stand-up comedy. It's more sketch comedy, but I love those cassettes, listening to those songs and the Cheese Shop sketch, and it was just so funny. Eddie Murphy was big when I was growing up. I can still remember him imitating his grandmother and the thermostat, and I really enjoyed his comedy. So Eddie Murphy and Monty Python, very different, 2 ends of the spectrum.
Oh yeah.
Those are cassette. That's how cassette tapes were. You didn't have unlimited access to anything. You just kind of had what you had, exactly. And that's all you could listen to. Yeah. So I had some Monty Python tapes and some Eddie Murphy tapes, and that's what I listened to.
I grew up on Monty Python too, and I had a really scary thing happen. When my son, he's 26 years old now, but when he was still living at home and he was getting into teenage years, showed him, this is Spinal Tap, the movie.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite movies. And he was watching it and he said, Dad, I hate this. He said, I do not like this movie. So we shut it off. And then I didn't recommend any movies to him for a while. But then a couple years later, I got Monty Python and the Holy Grail on DVD and had him watch it, and he fell in love. And I was like, okay, you really are my son. And he wanted the special edition for Christmas and all that kind of stuff. So I can definitely dig the Monty Python.
Yeah, some of those sketches are ageless. It's incredible. They're so funny.
I really liked John Cleese did a show called Faulty Towers after that, and that's another one of my favorites.
I'll have to check that out. I haven't seen it.
Oh, it's really good. Yeah, I think it's on Netflix.
Okay.
If not, it's on one of the BBC things. But yeah, it's really good. So you're doing. You decide you're going to do this, and you come from a non-comedy background. And did you tell anybody you're going to do this?
Not really. I mean, some very close friends knew, but it wasn't something that I broadcasted. I didn't invite people to my first open mic, which I'm relieved about now. About 6 months in, I got my first stage time at Comedy Works, which is the big famous club in Denver. And I invited some friends to that. But at the very beginning, no, I didn't know that I would stick with it. I didn't know it'd be so fun and engaging. After I did it 2-3 times, I go out as many nights a week as I can and really, really enjoy it to a level where many of my friends just don't understand why I would sit at a bar at 11 p.m. midnight, wait 2 hours for 3 minutes of stage time. It's can be hard to explain to what some people call civilians, non-comics.
Yeah, you put more effort into it than I think I ever will. I mean, you really, when you decided to do it, you would stay up all night, waiting to get that 3 minutes. And, I read in the book, sometimes you had to get up at 6 a.m. to catch a plane, for something. And, I admire that because I started out at a later time than you. I can't stay up that late anymore.
It's hard. It's hard. And it's funny. I record all my sets. I audio record all of them. I video record here and there. And I listen to all of them as well. And I can always tell a difference. Even if somebody just played them randomly for me, I could tell you about what time of night it was.
Yeah.
Because some mics are 5, 6 p.m. and I sound great and high energy and excited. And some mics, it's 1 a.m. and I just sound miserable. The material's funny, but I don't know. There's something in my voice that is just very tired.
Yeah.
It's something that I've learned over time. I can kind of fake that for a few minutes when I get on stage now to sound like it's 6 p.m. instead of 1 a.m. Because I didn't realize in the beginning that if I wasn't intentional about my voice, that I would sound like I was falling asleep and just bored with what I was doing, which was not the case at all. It was just I was physically exhausted.
And I respect that. And it makes you respect the comics that have to travel, because I have done some shows that are relatively far away, a couple hours, 2.5 hours, and just an open mic, because I wanted to get out of town and see what my material was like there. And, it's a long drive there, it's a long drive back, and you think about these comics that tour, and, they may have their last show at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, but then they got to get up in the morning. They got to do radio. They got to travel to the next place. Sometimes they're driving, sometimes they're flying. So you really got to respect that. And if that's the life that you're looking for, you got to understand that there's going to be some times of no sleep.
Yeah. It's tough. The one funny thing, I've had a lot of conversations with other comics about this. I used to hate to drive. And now I actually like driving because I can think about my material. Sometimes I'll record myself doing bits and then listen back to them and analyze them and improve them. And I'll listen to comedy podcasts like yours, or audiobooks about comedy, or comedy albums. And now it's to the point where I used to not like driving. Now, if somebody was like, hey, will you go pick up this thing for me 45 minutes away? I would hop at that opportunity because for whatever reason, I really like being in the car now.
Right. Yeah. I'm the same way. I enjoy the drive, and I've changed from, just listening to music all the time, the same as you, podcasts, audiobooks, comedy albums, all the whole gamut, just because you draw inspiration from it, and you always get a good nugget of advice out of just about everything you hear. So it really helps. I wanted to touch base a little bit on the recording aspect, because when I first started, somebody told me, a couple people said, hey, you got to record yourself all the time. And I didn't listen to them, and I wish I would have. And now I'm like you. I get an audio recording of everything, and I video. Usually when my wife's with me, I have her do the video for me because she's heard it all before anyway. And discuss the importance of that and what you do with it after you're done, because it's one thing to say, okay, record everything, but what do you do with that recording when you're done with it?
Yeah. Well, let me work backwards here. One of the newer, more advanced things I'm doing with the recordings, which I think is interesting, is when I listen back to them, I now track all my open mics in a spreadsheet where I actually write down what material I perform. So anywhere from 5 to 15 items for a 3 to 5 minute set. It could be one-liners or bits that I'm working on. And what I do with that is when I go back to that mic again, like it might be a week later, I will look at what I performed the last 2-3 weeks and just make sure I don't repeat material immediately. Like I never, now that I'm a little more organized, I never want to go to the same open mic, if it's every Wednesday, let's say, and perform the same material week after week. I want at least maybe like a month, 6 weeks spread. Now that I also have the luxury of having more material. In the beginning, you don't have any material, so you're doing the same stuff all the time. But now I have enough, 30, 45 minutes of material. I can kind of spread it around. And I always want to do my new stuff and work on it, but it just, I don't want to. There are a couple reasons for doing that. One is basically out of courtesy to the other comedians who are there. Maybe somebody has Wednesday nights off work and they're always at the Wednesday night mic. They're a comic. They don't want to hear me do the same stuff that I did last Wednesday. So I try and cycle the material. So that's one thing I do with it. Because you might say, well, why don't you just write a set list before you go up to the mic and then use that, and you don't need the recording. Well, the reality is, I've learned you change when you get up on stage. I do often write a set list before I get up at an open mic, but I might riff about something that happened in the room. I might tell a joke about candy and it goes really well. And then an audience member will yell out another kind of candy, and I'll have a joke about that candy, and I'll just completely change what I'm doing on stage. And so then I need the recording to go back and remember what I did. And often when I finish one mic, I'll hang out for a couple comics and then go try and hit another mic in the same night. And that's an advantage of being in a big city like Denver, which has an amazing comedy scene. And thank you so much to all the hosts of open mics everywhere. Like, I couldn't be more grateful for people who I complain a little bit about having to sit through a bunch of open mic comedy to get up and do my material. Imagine how difficult it is for the host of the open mic who has to sit there the entire time, be it 2 hours or in some cases like 6 hours of open mic comedy. It's incredible. So thank you. If you're an open mic host listening to this or might become an open mic host, thank you for doing that. The other thing I listen for are things that I can improve on and things that I did well. A good example, calling back to what I said earlier, was how my voice sounded tired. And now I intentionally remind myself to have some energy in my voice. Like, every comic's different. Some people are more deadpan, like an Anthony Jeselnik. He kind of always sounds low energy, but that's not really my I'm a little higher energy guy, and then on stage I have a little bit of energy, and I'm happy to be there is the idea I'm trying to communicate, but that doesn't always come across if I'm really tired. Sometimes I miss words. A good example of that is the other day I did a theater. It was an open mic, but it's a theater show in Denver where if you arrive early enough, you can sign up and get up at a theater, and there's like 50 audience members. So it's a great opportunity to get some stage time. What surprised me at this theater was that you could not see the audience. The lights were so bright. There were 50 to 75 people in the audience. I couldn't see a single person. It was just like blinding white light. And it scared me because I'm still a year and a half to 2 years in. I'm not touring around the country regularly or have a lot of stage experience. So that was maybe the third or fourth time in my life that I'd performed without being able to see the audience. And I was scared. So I think I was a little nervous. And a joke of mine, a bit I have about Valentine's Day, didn't hit the way I expected it to. And it wasn't until I listened to the recording the next day that I realized in the beginning, I said the word Kit Kat instead of Twix, which I have no idea why. The whole joke is about Twix. I don't know why I said Kit Kat. It was just like a mental mistake. And but that explains why later in the joke, it didn't, like, the joke just doesn't make sense when I say the wrong word.
Yeah.
And that's a unique situation. That doesn't happen that often, that I slip up on a detail like that and don't know it in real time. But that was an example where I remember thinking, boy, that joke has done a lot better for less people. There are a lot of people in this audience, a lot of people here. Why are they not laughing like they did at the 2 bits before it? And then later I found out that I made a mistake in the delivery. So that's another reason to listen. Sometimes just the act of listening to me tell material will make me think of tags. The same way, like when I watch other open mic comedians, sometimes I'll be like, oh, it'd be funny if he went down this path. And sometimes just listening, there's something different about writing out jokes and verbally expressing jokes and then listening back to the jokes. Sometimes I'll think of funny words that I can add into an existing joke. There's just, like, I could go on for probably half an hour I could write a whole book about the benefits of listening to your sets. And it just amplifies when you watch yourself on stage.
Right.
Just real quick to go into video analysis, like just watching yourself, even with the volume off, is interesting. Like, I've noticed a lot of things I do that is not good. Most recently, I used to be a mic out of the stand person. And in the last few months, I've been experimenting with leaving the mic in the stand. And I noticed something on video recently that I do, which I don't like, which is basically I leave my hands close to where my pockets are and very still for upwards of a minute. And it just looks super awkward. And I don't notice it on stage, but watching the video, I've realized, oh, I need to be a little more animated with my hands and move their position more frequently. So, very long. Great question. Got me very excited.
Yeah. And that's something that really didn't sink in with me for a while. And now, I've actually gotten to the point where I've got a separate audio recorder instead of using my phone. And the reason why is because it's real easy to plug into my computer with USB, and I can just take it out, and I'm not filling up my phone and all that kind of stuff. But I also use that because I seem to get probably 70% of my ideas while I'm driving. And if I'm driving, I can mute my phone, pull that up and say, here's the premise, dogs or whatever. And then I don't forget it, and I can go on with my day. So yeah, it's so important, and it's hard. At first, it's really hard to listen to yourself, to watch yourself, because you hate your own voice, and everybody does, and you don't like what you said. All you can hear is the mistakes, and but
what makes you better?
Yeah, but you have to listen for the laughter too. I mean, if somebody's laughing and you're making mistakes, that's fine. And it's so funny. I had a similar experience to you at that theater because I recently did a comedy competition in Grand Rapids, and the comedy club is the same. The lights are so strong, and I'm 6'5", so I'm by the lights anyway. So the lights were so strong that I couldn't see anybody. I could see one guy in the front row, and I did a similar thing with a joke. I forgot the most important tag on the joke, because the middle tag, it was a 3-tag joke. The middle tag got a lot more laughter than I'm used to. It's usually a building thing, and it got the laughter that the last tag normally gets. And I thought, okay, I'm done. And I went on to the next joke. And when I sat down, just my wife was with me. And right when I sat down, I'm like, oh man, I forgot the fact that we don't front, because that was my tag.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man. And she says it's okay because the middle tag did fine. So, but you just know.
Yeah.
As soon as you sit down, and, fortunately that's recorded, and I can look at that and say, well, let's not forget that tag again.
Right. Yeah. It's a good reminder. Yeah. I have a fun small story. I have a web series and podcast as well called Mark Masters. And I was interviewing a guy, Jake Hovis, who's a comedian out of Denver, who, very funny guy. We did a show in Aspen together. Anyways, I was asking him about what he does with his recordings, and very interesting. He shares every open mic recording with his wife the very next morning. And she provides feedback within a day or two. Mm-hmm. And so they have this like relationship where he's going out to open mics, recording his material, and running it by his wife, who I think is a saint in that situation for listening to all his material and providing feedback. And he said that he sometimes slips inside jokes just between his wife and him into his stand-up material because he knows that she's going to eventually listen to the recording. I thought that was very cute.
That's great. Yeah. I'd have to say my wife's kind of the same. I do almost exactly the same thing with my wife, and
that's like a superpower. That's great.
Yeah, and the fact that she schleps around with me all the time. I mean, she will come live and see the same stuff that I did last week and the week before, and very supportive, and I appreciate that.
That's awesome.
I love you, honey.
Really. Terrific.
Maybe she's listening to the podcast. I know she listened to my last one.
You're the best. Yeah. Thank you for doing that for Scott.
So one thing I wanted to ask, in addition, this was interesting in your book, and something I haven't done, but once I read it, I thought, oh gosh, it's stupid that I don't do it. Not only do you keep a good spreadsheet of your own stuff, but you take really good notes on the other comics. Can you talk about that? I talk about
that a lot in the book. I don't do that as much anymore, which is interesting. Again, saying I'm a different comedian than I was at the end of that 6-month period when I wrote the book. Frankly, I don't have the same patience that I used to have. And also, in Denver, there's 200 to 300 open mic comics. And it ebbs and flows, and new people come in and old people drop out. But there's a core of, like, let's say 200 comics that I know their face and their name at this point. I've seen them enough. And so also that there's not as much value in that. Mm-hmm. So it used to be I was just trying to learn people's names and figure out their material. It's kind of fun, too, because it can get boring to sit there for a long time. And it would be fun to figure out, like, oh, this comic, he watched a lot of George Carlin, or this is a Jerry Seinfeld disciple, or this guy really enjoys Jim Gaffigan humor, or this guy even stole I remember this joke, and it came from, Steve Martin or whomever. It was just a way to pass the time. Another thing in the Denver scene, which is a little different than many scenes, not every open mic is run like a show up, go up mic where it goes in list order. And that might be a little bit too much vernacular for non-comedians. But if you're an open mic comedian, you know what I'm talking about. And in certain open mics in Denver, they just kind of pick people at random order. And the justification is that it's not random. They're really trying to present a good show. So that to try and keep regular audience members there, they'll try and do a good comedian every few spots in between comedians that are newer and haven't quite figured it all out yet. And so now that I'm approaching 2 years in, I'm still not good yet, but I'm better than I was when I first started. So in the beginning, it was not uncommon to show up an hour early to a mic and still wait 3 hours after the mic started to get my 3 minutes of stage time because I was a nobody and not very funny. Now, sometimes I'll show up 10 minutes before the mic. There are already 20 people there. And maybe I get up 45 minutes in or half an hour in because, they need somebody that they know will tell good jokes, which is good and bad. It's great for me because it's more time efficient and I can hit more mics. Sometimes I feel pressure, though, to be funny and use material that I know works when I really want to work on a joke that is brand new and I don't know if it's going to work.
That is an excellent point. I've been caught in that conundrum several times. And just last night I did the local mic here. And instead of the normal crowd, a whole bunch of Notre Dame students piled in and the place was packed. It was standing room only. And guess what I did? I went back to tried and true. And I had some new stuff I wanted to try. And that all that does is delays your progress by a week. So it's tricky.
And you learn, like now I'll do a sandwich, right? I'll do something I know works, something new, something I know works. Yeah. And if there's something, you also learn savers and stuff like that. Like if there's something new doesn't work, you can almost get as big a laugh just by saying, hey guys, this is open mic comedy. It's not all going to work. Yeah. Or you say something like that and people will laugh just at that because it's very present and in the moment. And it as an audience member, it makes you feel like you're part of something special and not just hearing people read from a script.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's hard when you're a comic and you have the chance to show your stuff to new people and just bring out the greatest hits. It's hard not to latch onto that, but it's also important with that crowd that's never seen you to pull out some of that new stuff and make sure that they hear that too.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say for comedians getting started to kind of highlight what's in the book. So I would write down the name of every open mic comedian that went up before me and some kind of observation about their set. I like what they did with their hands during the set. Did something silly with the mic stand. Told a joke about video games. Maybe I hadn't ever heard a joke about video games. Combined jokes about food and, I don't know, furniture. Something about their set just to kind of keep myself engaged and present in the open mic. And just by taking those notes, I would learn a lot. And it was just a way for me to speed up my development as a comedian, right? Just by actively observing. And I would also, one of the things that maybe I didn't do so well in the beginning, which everybody should be aware of as well, is it's important to network and meet the other comedians in your scene. So you can't have your face in a notebook the whole time, which maybe I erred on the side of doing that a little too much. And then on the other side, you're not going to make best friends with all the comics the first week you show up at an open mic because, frankly, people come and go at an alarming rate, and comics don't want to invest much time in random strangers that may or may not be there in a few weeks.
Right. Now, do you consider yourself an outgoing person, or are you a bit of an introvert naturally?
I would say I'm an introvert. There are a lot of times and places in comedy, like I produce shows and run shows and host them now. And you have to be outgoing, I think, to run a good show. Like I try, all my shows that I run, I want them to be regular. They're monthly shows, and I want people to come back, and we get return visitors all the time. And I think part of the reason for that is I go out of my way before the show and after the show to go around and thank people for showing up, ask them where they came from, how they heard about the show, try and get more data that can help me improve the show. And that's like, it's hard for me. It doesn't come naturally. I have to go out of my way to be outgoing like that. I think my happy place is, in a corner, in a quiet room, writing jokes in a notebook.
Right.
I don't necessarily want to be on stage or be talking to a bunch of people. So, yeah.
And that's part of that's part of the fun of doing stand up is it breaks you through that, and it forces you into that out, at least for the time you're on stage, you're forced into that outgoing posture and talking to people. And I'm the same way. I'm an introvert, but I've been in the business world for a long time, so I have trained myself to act like an extrovert. And
Yeah.
that early on, I really was meeting comics and talking to them. I much prefer a one-on-one conversation with no small talk and just talking about what's important to us. But in a group, I will force myself to talk a little bit. It takes a ton of energy, and it's really it's really a lot more difficult than people think it is. But it definitely pays off, because for a while there, I kind of went into my shell and did that. Just put my head in my notebook and stopped talking to people, and you don't get anywhere that way.
Yeah. I think that's a trained extrovert is what I am.
Yeah. And you use a lot of words that a lot of newer comics I don't hear using. So I know you come from probably some sort of a business background, because you use words like data and statistics and things like that. How do you think that your previous life helped you get into comedy and become more successful more quickly?
Well, okay, sure, I have become more successful more quickly than anybody else. But if I have had success, I can certainly pinpoint areas where my past professional experience has definitely helped. Mm-hmm. Like just the fact that I'm savvy with how spreadsheets work, which is not like any kind of superpower. It's just I've spent a lot of time in cubicles over 20 years. I am good with spreadsheets. It's not something I advertise or am proud about, but it's just something I've learned. And that's helped me, like tracking, I run multiple shows now where I have to track, who I'm paying, what I'm paying, when they're showing up, the order of the person, how you contact these people. And so like just the kind of logistics or the planning, I'm pretty good at that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think that's definitely helped. It's certainly helped me in the show running. So I run the Vail Comedy Show, which is probably my premier show. It runs once a month in Vail, Colorado with the Vail Brewing Company. If anybody takes a ski vacation, if you're planning 3 months ahead of time, send me a note and I'll schedule the weekend around so you can see some amazing comedians. We get great touring comedians at the show and pack out this brewery. It's really, it's a special thing. We've made the front page of the newspaper there, and it's been very exciting. And I honestly probably couldn't have done that and been an open mic comedian without my past professional experience. Right. Just like dealing with the venue, communicating professionally, setting up things. I'm always trying to improve the show. Like I'm always adding new elements to the show, like different lighting, or there's a TV in the back of this showroom, and I set up a camera on the stage last month and then put the video on the TV in the back. Mm-hmm. So that's just an example of something to try and just make the show better. Every month I try and add something new and make it better. So it's, a lot of people who run shows, they just, it's a mic and a speaker and a comedian, and that's great. Like the focus should be on great comedy. And I try and book the funniest comedians, the best comedians I can, because that's what you want. But also an important element to shows is having a good captive audience that is excited to be there. Mm-hmm. And so I feel a responsibility to make an incredible environment for comedians so that those comics tell their friends, and this literally happened. Somebody came up to me and said, hey, this other comedian told me that I have to get on the Vail Comedy Show. How do I get on the Vail Comedy Show? And that just like warms my heart. There's a whole chapter in my book how I'm not on Facebook. Spoiler alert, I'm still not on Facebook. There's like a question mark kind of in the book if I ever will get on Facebook. I'm almost 2 years in, and I've had a couple things happen recently. Resisting that. I've never been on it in my whole life, and that makes things difficult in certain ways. But people, even not being on Facebook, when you do good things, people will hear about them. I don't even know how it happens, but people come up to me and say like, hey man, I saw you were on TV8 up in Vail doing the morning TV show. That's incredible. That was really cool. How can I become a part of that? And I didn't tell anybody that. I'm not on social media in any meaningful way, and I'm not on Facebook or Instagram. Somehow, somebody else found a clip of it and shared it, or I don't even know how it happened. This works in the converse way as well. If you do bad stuff, it's going to show up as well. Yeah. And luckily that hasn't happened to me, but whether you're on social media or not, the point is that the good work you do will probably get out to other people. And that's what I focus on. Whenever somebody quizzes me on why I'm not on Facebook, I'll usually ask them how much time, I'll ask, are you on Facebook, Scott?
Yeah.
How much time do you think you spend a day on Facebook?
I would say at least 2 hours.
Yeah. Okay. So great. That's a great response. Some people say 30 minutes, which I think they're lying. Other people will say like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
And I just say, imagine if you spent all that time writing or trying to make your show better or whatever. And so anyway, to get back to your original question about how my professional past has helped my current comedy, the shows that I think are better and exist because I had a professional past, the benefit to me as a comedian is stage time. It is so competitive and difficult. In Denver, there are easily 150 comedians that are no question better than I am in Denver. So if somebody is trying to book a comic in Denver, there are 150 people who will basically do comedy for close to free because they're still open mic comedians. These aren't touring, headliner kind of people. They're not past at Comedy Works, but they're all better than I am as a comedian. So it's very difficult to get stage time in the Denver, Colorado market where I am, being 1.5 to 2 years in. So by organizing shows, I have, I get to do 10 minutes up top as a host and practice and get more experience being on stage. So that's been very valuable for me. So that has helped me, I think, get more successful than I would have been without that past experience.
Right. And I've talked about this a little bit before. Sometimes just the maturity of years helps a little bit too. You started, I think you said you started in the book when you were 42. Is that correct?
We're losing each other?
Yeah, just a little bit.
All right, we're back.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, I was 42.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you said anything after that, but I started comedy at 42, which is a ripe old age.
Right. So you've had some life experience. Obviously, I started when I was 50, so I'm a later bloomer than even you.
I love to hear that.
Yeah. But I guess the thing is we've probably had some real things happen in our life. I mean, by the time I started, I had gone through some of my friends passing away. My best friend in high school passed away. I've had kids. I've had great things and terrible things. And I guess it kind of centers you when you start comedy because you can have the worst open mic ever, and it ain't that big of a deal. I mean, you want to get better, but it certainly isn't the worst thing that's happened in your life, so you can move on from it. When you're 22, you may not have experienced all that stuff, and the worst open mic of your life is the worst thing of your life at that point. Right. And that's I understand that, but if I would have started when I was 21 or 22, I probably would have quit because I couldn't handle the disappointment. Right.
Yeah, there's a discipline and a maturity that comes with age that helps. And any comic, even 17-year-olds that are in the Denver scene, some of them work very hard. Working hard is not age specific.
Right.
There are young people that work hard and old people that work hard, and there are old people that don't work hard. But for sure, the comedians who put in the most energy and effort into the craft, I see becoming better faster. Now, there are some people with incredible talent and just great energy, but that's been a surprise to me that in comedy, there's so much of it is the work you put in. The funniest people are some of the hardest workers because they're constantly trying new material and writing new material and exploring different avenues and, taking any stage time they can to get better. And that's not I do feel like I'm good at that. Like I'm good at working hard and being disciplined, but I wouldn't necessarily say that that's only because I'm 40 something. There's certainly some very young comics that work incredibly hard that I'm very impressed with. And the sacrifices they make are incredible.
Oh yeah.
I'm fortunate. I'm older. I have, I'm not well off by any means, but I have resources that I've built up over the years, like a place to sleep that's comfortable, for example. And some of these comedians, I remember being in my 20s and not having a great place to sleep. And to do that and go out every night to open mics it's impressive. It takes a strong will.
Yeah, I have mad respect for some of these folks. I mean, I know of some Chicago area comics that they've got a gym membership and they live in their car. And that's what they do. They go to the gym every day and shower and do their day job, which may be Starbucks or whatever, and then they are hitting every mic that they can all week. And mad respect for that. And
so it's easy for us to complain about being sleepy at 11 p.m. But on the flip side, we have some things going for us too.
Yeah, I wanted. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, kind of a point of view thing. You decided early on, right out of the gate, that you were going to be a clean comic. And what went into that decision? And are you glad you made it? What goes into that?
Yeah. So I think, honestly, I read an article maybe 20 years ago by Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, I could be misremembering this, where he basically, the thesis was that if you start, it's harder to write clean comedy, but you make more money doing clean comedy, or maybe he didn't talk about money. Maybe he just said, you'll be more successful if you do clean comedy. And if you start dirty, it's hard to become clean later. And so basically the message I heard was it's more difficult to be good at clean comedy. And it's more difficult to get laughs at clean comedy. And I am a person who really likes a challenge. And so it's already challenging enough to get up in front of a bunch of strangers and tell some jokes you're not sure are any good. But I decided early on that I wanted to make, I want to be successful. And so I heard some advice from some smart, respected comedians that said, you start out clean. And kind of, it's not like that's a big stretch for me. I'm not like a very, my real life persona is fairly clean. I'm not, crazy person, or, I like to have fun, but not in any kind of R-rated or, crazy way that would ever offend anybody. I don't think. So it's kind of like my natural persona anyways. So I started doing the clean stuff. And then as I met more comedians and some more seasoned comedians who were very generous with their time to maybe have conversations that you could consider mentoring, many of them revealed to me that the only money they ever really make is through corporate gigs that aren't even necessarily stand-up comedy. They're more like keynote speaking kind of things. And then they do club work where they barely get paid at all, or go do these bar shows. But the real money, the way they're paying their mortgage, is through corporate events where they have to work clean. So I kind of learned early on that, and a lot of people say, don't think about money in comedy. And I kind of have mixed feelings about that. Like I'm putting a lot of time into this. It's basically a hobby. It's not really a business at this point, but I would like it to become a business. I would like to, I don't ever foresee myself making like Kevin Hart money. You know, he's making tens of millions of dollars a year. But if I could make $50,000 a year, that would be incredible. That would be and to do something that I absolutely love, that would be the best thing ever. So I would like to be on a path to, in 4 to 8 years, be making that kind of money. And so I want to look at how do I do that, and doing clean to keep this thing self-sustaining. Now, I will say, for the benefit of listeners, that I've more recently discovered, as I've become a better joke writer, that it is so fun to do not clean material. And how you define clean comedy is very complicated. But for me, I almost never swear on stage. In fact, I'm not sure. I'm sure I have 2 or 3 times ever in 400 or 500 mics or stage appearances. But even without swearing, like I have a new joke that uses all words that you could express to a kindergartner, and it would understand what you were saying. But the joke is about a very complex, dirty topic. And I think it's hilarious. And audiences, they also think it's hilarious, but it's also very offensive in some ways. And it always gets a reaction. And it's hard to tell sometimes if that. I kind of. And
we cut out a little bit there. We cut out a little bit there.
It's fun to tell a joke like that. So I've learned that more recently. Oh, sorry. Yeah, just to let me turn off my video for a second. See if that helps any. Yeah, I was just saying that sometimes it's fun to tell not clean material.
Right. It's really fun. I'm the same as you. I'm clean and I rarely swear. My in real life, I use very colorful language. But I lead a pretty clean life now, but I do material on my past drug use and, sex and stuff like that, but I keep it totally clean. I've got one joke where I say that's a load of baloney, then I say sorry for the strong language, and that always gets a laugh. And it's harder to do, but once you get into that, it's really challenging and fun to find out how to take on some more adult topics and make it so that you can say it completely clean.
Yeah. One of the things I've been having fun with recently is I start out and do a bunch of very clean material, and then I start searching for that line and telling these clean jokes that are about more mature topics. And it's almost funnier because it's coming from me, pretty established that I'm super clean.
Right.
And what I haven't figured the next step out, which is how you then bring it back to be clean again and get laughs.
Right. I don't want to minimize the fact that you're not on social media. We got into a tangent there, and so folks, Mark is making a little comedy career for himself, and he is not promoting anything on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And
I am on Twitter, but barely.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not on Facebook is the big thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not on Instagram as well, which is owned by Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, you can survive without it. I have a lot of respect for you for doing that. It's funny. I did a show. It was one of the mics I did in Grand Rapids that I hadn't done before. And the last guy that came up, the guy who was announcing, said, and next up is Adam, and let's congratulate him because he deactivated his Facebook account.
Yeah.
And everybody cheered for him. So Facebook's become one of those things that we think is a necessary evil that's not that necessary.
Yeah, that's a controversial topic. There are a lot of comedians that think I'm really stupid for not being on Facebook and that I'm hindering my comedy career. And I feel like at some point that might be a little more valid. The reality is at this point, a lot of people use Facebook to message show bookers and try and get booked on shows. Yep. And I'm not necessarily at a skill level a year and a half in where I should be bothering showrunners. They're booking people who have been doing comedy 5 to 10 years. I should keep my head down and focus on the craft and try and get so funny that people just hear about me through word of mouth and reach out to me, want to find out how to reach me directly. And being at an open mic 5 nights a week, you know, I'm seeing all the comedians, and if people want to come, and this happens, people come up to me and say, "Hey, I heard you're not on Facebook. Can I get your phone number, your email, so I can get you on a show sometime?" And that's starting to happen, which feels good to me. But there are a lot of people who think it's not a good idea. So the jury is still out on it. It's a little bit of an experiment. We'll see how it works in the long run. I will say that for every person that thinks it's a really bad idea, there are people who say, "Oh my goodness, I had no idea you could even not be on Facebook. You must be such a happy person."
Yeah.
And I've never been on Facebook, so I don't really understand what happens on there. But apparently there's a lot of like bile and, you know, negative drama and beefs between comedians and just a lot of the kind of stuff that if it happened in real life, like if I was at a table and people started like, I don't know, demeaning other people or just being really negative, I'd come up with an excuse to go, you know, do something. I just say, I got to go get a drink or something like that. And I just excuse myself in that situation. I don't necessarily want to be around that kind of energy. So I guess that's a benefit to not being on Facebook. Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head, and it depends on how you take it, on some of these things. I mean, it can be a crazy experience because, you know, everybody's so divided or whatever. But, you know, when I tell you I spend 2 hours on Facebook a day, most of that is just promoting stuff. So, I'm not really reading all the other junk on there. And, it's not, you know, it's not that big of a deal for me, but I can see how it could really, get on people's nerves and, you know, just kind of make their life worse. And who wants that?
Yeah, I've definitely talked to some comedians that only use it. They don't consume stuff on Facebook. They only put out information.
Right.
So that seemed, it does. I mean, it's enormously powerful. The shows that I run, the venues that I have great partnerships with, like Silver City Saloon in Aspen and Vail Brewing Company in Vail, Colorado, they have strong Facebook and social media presences. And I'm definitely taking advantage of that and using that to my benefit to draw crowds. It's just, it's not my, you know, I pass the information along to the venue in a consistent and orderly manner, and it makes it easy for them to post it on their Facebook, and somehow the people show up. I also do a lot of stuff with newspapers and other media because I'm not on Facebook. A funny thing about the Facebook is one of the reasons I'm not on Facebook is because I'm older. And when it was introduced, I just thought it was a silly idea. And for a long time, people thought that I was dumb for not being on Facebook. But more recently, the last couple of years, there's been kind of a backlash against social media and just trying to keep up with the Joneses and showing off what you're doing all the time.
Yeah.
And people have come around to me, people who 10 years ago were like, you know, you're dumb for not being on Facebook, have said, you know what, you might have had a good idea. You know what? I'm coming around to what you're talking about. Or I just deleted my Facebook. You were right.
Yeah.
Turns out it's not the best thing ever.
You're a trailblazer by not you're a trailblazer by not joining in with the crowd.
Yeah, I guess so. And even though I don't share on Facebook, I do share quite a bit because, you know, I have the book that I wrote, Not Good Yet. I have a website, markmasters.co. I have a mailing list on that website. You know, I have ways that people can hear from me and learn about me.
Yeah.
Just not on social media, really.
Well, let's talk about the mailing list, because I got my first installment of your mailing list where you featured me on it because you talk about your fans on it near the end. What a wonderful mailing list. I mean, mailing lists tend to be, I've joined them and they tend to be, I'm going to be in this city, I'm going to be doing this, I'm on this podcast, I'm going to be on this show, blah, 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 and that's all it is. You actually talk about stuff in your life, and you talk about the shows, the good and the bad, and you talk about people you've met and stuff like that. It's really almost like a really nicely written blog article as a newsletter.
Yeah, well, it's a once a month communication to people who are interested in what I'm doing, but maybe aren't willing to come to open mics 5 nights a week, but still want to get a sense of what's going on. In a lot of ways, if people out there have read my book, Not Good Yet, the monthly emails are like future chapters of the book. Mm-hmm. So the book is about my first 6 months and first 100 open mics. If you want to know what I'm doing at open mic, around when I hit the 450 open mic milestone, the mailing list is the way to do it.
Right.
And to be totally honest, if I write another book, which I probably will do, probably about my first 2 years of comedy, which will be coming up in June, I will use the mailing list, the blog posts as you described it, to write the outline of the book. It's a way for me to remember what I did and what I felt like at any given time. And it's a lot of something like you just joined for this month, which was a very good email. It was a very positive, good in the sense that I had a lot of positive things happen in comedy for me in the last month. But my December email was a total disaster. In fact, the title of the email was some alliteration around December, and a disastrous December, I think is what it was. Because like so many things went wrong. And I even talked about possibly quitting, and it was a very rough month. So I try and be as honest and transparent about how things are going, because I really want people to feel like they're on this journey with me. Like I said before, there are 200-300 comedians in Denver. It's difficult for me to get people to join the mailing list. People obviously don't like email, marketing kind of emails. So I might perform in front of, 25 people. Maybe I'm on like sometimes I do book tour type things, and I'll talk about my book for, half an hour, and I'll sell 5 copies of it. And I'll ask everybody in the audience, 25 people, to join my mailing list. I might even ask people to raise their hand if they will join the mailing list. 10 of them will raise their hand. And 12 hours later, 0 people will have joined the mailing list. So it's a huge uphill battle. I'm not even up to 100 subscribers yet. I'm getting close to 100 subscribers. And that'll be a big milestone for me when I hit it. I think I'm in the low 80s right now. But it's been really difficult just to get to that number. But I know the people who are subscribed, they do care about what happens with me. And so if they're, in a suburb of Chicago and I am going to be there doing a show, there's a good chance they might come out and see me. And that's what I'm trying to do. It's a very long game. I might run this mailing list for another 3 years and maybe get it up to 1,000 subscribers, to the point where I can go to Pensacola, Florida, a place I've never been to in my life, and where I'm at a comedic skill level way past where I am now, but maybe playing a very small club or a small show, and actually draw people. That's what I want to do. And get people who can tell their friends, hey, I've been watching this guy for like 2 years. Here's this, he's going to be something. But you have a chance to see him in this disgusting bar that you would never go to otherwise.
Right.
Let's go watch him.
Yeah. And that's really, when you talk marketing, getting that 1,000 true fans is what you want anyway. So building up to that is definitely important. And I just have to stress that I'm on mailing lists, and I've unsubscribed from lots of mailing lists because they're boring, they're salesy. Yours is not a boring, salesy mailing list. You put your heart into it, and it really shows. So I bet everybody who subscribes and reads one sticks with it.
Yeah, well, I have had one unsubscribe. That happened after the December email. So I'm at 83. I was making it sound like I don't know how many subscribers I have. I do know exactly how many subscribers I have. I have 83 total. And at one point I had, if the one person hadn't dropped out, I would have had 84. So I'm pretty proud of that ratio.
Yeah, that's good.
So yeah, it's fun. And if anybody's interested in the logistics of that, I use a tool called MailChimp. Yep. It's free. You get to 2,000 subscribers, I think is the way it works, which is years away for me. And it does take a ton of time. You'd be shocked at how long it took to write that email that you read.
Oh, I bet.
With all the photos, you got to upload the photos. And I try and some of the things I've tried to do to make the emails more engaging is use more pictures and involve the people who are reading the email.
Right.
So I recently I created these stickers for the Vail Comedy Show. There are these cute alpaca things. I think did I send you one?
You did. I've actually got it here, and I just got a new whiteboard for my studio, and I think I'm going to put it on my whiteboard. So I'll send you a picture.
Send me a picture. So what I've been doing is basically, if people send me $5 through Venmo, I mail them one of these stickers with a personal note. And then they've been sending me pictures of what they did with the sticker, like on a laptop in Seattle or in a green room at some club. And then I end up putting it back in the email, and people get excited about that. So that's kind of cool. So I love it if you subscribe to the mailing list, which you can find at markmasters.co, and then send me a picture later of you reading the mailing list, or if you get a sticker or a book or something. That's terrific.
It's great marketing. I know a few people who do that sticker thing, and it gets exciting for the people who are involved, and it's a great marketing tool, and it's probably something I'm going to pick up for the podcast here too. So
nice.
Yeah, look for that.
I'm not sure if it's great marketing. I think I have sold and mailed 4 stickers so far. So I still haven't even paid for the original stickers, and I'm certainly not selling out stadiums yet. But if in 5 to 10 years this all works out, then we can look back and say, that was good. That was smart. Yeah. Mark knew what he was doing. But right now, I really don't know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of guessing and trying to work as hard as I can and be as humble as I can.
Yeah, you're doing great. Has anybody actually reached out to you after reading the book like I did and said, boy, thank you for writing this book?
Yeah, for sure. I had somebody I don't even know in Florida wrote me a note and said, this was the book I was looking for. Thank you so much. It's helped me at my open mics. And I don't even know how that person heard about the book, which is fun because, on Amazon, I have 15 or 16 reviews right now. And I think I know 14 of those people.
Yeah.
Like one of them's a parent of a high school friend. Other people are comics that I know personally. I kind of know, or somebody that I met in Chicago on a book tour. Like I know pretty much everybody, a club owner in Arizona that I met. Like I know everybody there. So it's fun when it's somebody that I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's pretty neat.
That's
neat
great.
For me. Yeah, it's happened. I mean, it's not happening every day with different people, but maybe 10 people have reached out and said, thanks a lot for putting this together.
We're getting, we've gone a while here, but there's one thing I really want to touch on with you, actually a couple things. You were on a podcast called I'm Not Joking with Dr. Peter McGraw.
Yeah.
And you touched on a subject there that is near and dear to my heart because I'll just say I'm a real procrastinator when it comes to writing. And if I don't have something pressing coming up, it's really hard for me to carve out time for writing. And in that podcast, you talked about something that you're doing that I think is fantastic. You start your day off with it's a 20-20-20 thing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can. First off, thank you for doing your research and listening to that podcast. It's great. It's an incredible podcast. Neil Brennan's been on it. Dr. Peter McGraw is an incredible guy. He has a new book coming out on April 1st. I forget what it's called. It hasn't even really been announced yet, but by the time people listen to this, the book may be out. So check it out.
I'm actually interviewing him next week.
Oh, terrific. Awesome.
It's so fun because I found you and then I listened to your episode on that podcast and I immediately reached out to him because his first book, The Humor Code, is just a great book. And I did get an advanced copy of the next book coming out. So we're going to talk about that too. So
awesome.
That's networking for you, you know?
Yeah. It's an example of how small the comedy world is.
Yeah.
I had a real quick aside. I had a comedian the other day. We went that theater show that I was talking about earlier. I'd arrived very early. Me, him, and another comedian went and got some food once we finally got signed up while we were waiting for the show to start. And I didn't know this other comedian very well. And when we sat down to dinner, he was like, "Hey, I you don't know me, but I saw you in Boston when you were doing, like, I was on vacation in Boston a year ago, and I went and did 3 open mics. He saw me there because he lived in Boston and he'd recently moved to Denver. And it was just an example of what a small world comedy is.
Yes.
They kind of see the same people over and over again and run into the same. Anyway, so the 20-20-20 thing, which I'll tell you what it is, and then we'll have a big reveal at the end.
Yeah.
It was 20 minutes of meditation, 20 minutes transcendental meditation, which Jerry Seinfeld is huge on. And a lot of comedians swear it's like the secret to unlocking success in life and in comedy. So transcendental meditation, which you can do with nap or whatever. 20 minutes of writing, what I would do is I'd use an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and a pencil, and I would just write continuously for 20 minutes. It doesn't need to be good. Doesn't need to be bad. It's just you're writing the whole time. And in the beginning, my hand would cramp up. It's not easy to physically write for 20 straight minutes.
Right.
And I'd usually get to, like, I would fill both sides of the page and maybe half of another page usually. And then 20 minutes of reading, which was very fun. I really enjoyed doing it. I hate to admit this, but it stopped not very long after that podcast.
Oh, really?
Basically, I went on a vacation and I got out of the habit and I stopped doing it. I aim to do those 3 things throughout my day still, but I have very mixed results. I was really good about it for a while, and in full honesty and transparency, I don't do it anymore, but I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it inspired me because I had tried the meditation thing a few times, and I felt like a failure. And then my wife she's got a meditation app on her phone, and it's something that helps you get into the meditative state. And one of the things they said on that app that I heard was it's okay if thoughts come in or negative things come in, think them out and then just push them away. And I always felt like I failed when I couldn't clear my mind, and as you do it, it's like a muscle. Obviously, you work your mind and you can get better at it. But I felt like a failure so many times I just walked away from it. And now what you said on that podcast kind of inspired me to get back to that part, and then also the writing part. And so that's one of the things I'm trying to incorporate in my day is I set a lower bar for myself at 10 minutes. And sometimes I exceed it, but I always try to make sure I do at least the 10 minutes for sure.
Yeah, maybe that's what I need to do. That's good advice. Lower the bar.
Yeah.
Do 10, 10, 10. I think the other important thing to realize, I'm terrible at the meditation as well. And it's like the writing. Like it could be good, it could be bad. One day I might be good at the meditation. It's okay if I'm not great at the meditation.
Yeah.
It's like a muscle that you build over time.
Right. Well, I think we have an expectation of ourselves that everything we write should be good and something that we can actually turn into a bit. And that's not necessarily the case.
No, for sure not. I remember hearing Joe Rogan talk about how once he comes up with a premise, he'll write like 3 to 5 pages in a Google Doc of just everything. And what he ends up actually using in the bit is, low percentage points of the total stuff he's thought of.
Right.
So,
yeah. So just the act of writing itself opens up your mind to the good stuff to come in. But if you don't force yourself to write, it's just not going to come to you. So you got to know that maybe 80% of it's not going to be material that you're going to actually develop or work with, at least not now. I've gone back to stuff that I wrote when I first started, and I've actually brought it, I've updated it and brought it into the act, and it actually works. So you never say never on the stuff you write as well.
Yeah, for sure. Go through old joke books, your notebooks, and mine for material. Now that you're a better comedian, a better writer, you can those old premises can turn into gold sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Mark, I just want to say that I think I've only scratched the surface with you. Would you be willing to come back on and do another interview at some point?
Yeah, of course. I'd love to. That'd be terrific.
I like to keep these like less than an hour and a half, because I know my attention span. I can listen to about an hour and a half of a podcast, and when they get into the 2.5 hours, I'm like, oh, like Rogan's podcast. Some of his are marathons. I like to keep it short, but I just feel like I want to check in with you every once in a while, and even if we don't sit and talk for an hour, I just want to find out how Mark's doing.
That's great. And well, you're on the mailing list, so you're gonna find out anyways. But yeah, we can sit and chat. Anytime.
I think you are definitely a complex and engaging person, and you would be the person, if I was doing an open mic in Denver, I would be drawn to you just because your energy is one of those I would like. I want to know what he's all about. So I feel like I know a little bit about what you're about, but obviously I want to know more. So.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's stay in touch, and I'm excited. By the way, your podcast, that Tom Dreesen episode, what a get for your very first episode.
Oh, I tell you, how
did that happen?
One thing I'm not afraid to do is ask, and I've probably reached out to, since I started this podcast, I've probably reached out to 30 or 40 people that either didn't answer me or gave me a hard no. But Dreesen was somebody that I had interacted with him on Facebook, actually, in a group that's mostly a lot of old comics, and he's in there. Dobie Maxwell's the guy who started the group, and he's a little bit older than me, and just a lot of the old guards on there. And he really was the guy, the first comic that I ever noticed, and he's the one that every time I thought about comedy, it was always like, okay, that time I saw you on Mike Douglas, that Mike Douglas thing always came up, and the fact that I always would search him out and watch him on Carson and stuff like that. So I did get to see him in Valparaiso do his Sinatra show, because if you listen to the episode, he worked with Frank Sinatra for 14 years. And so I saw the show, and after the show, this podcast was still an idea. After that show, it was I think I had bought the domain and stuff like that, but I hadn't started interviews yet. And I told him there, I said, I'd really like to get you on the podcast. And then he said, yeah, message me on Facebook, and then we'll talk via email. So we did a couple email things. It really only took a week for me to get him on after we started talking. And, it's so great when I reach out to these comics. I'm like, yeah, I've talked to people like Tom Dreesen, and that's all I really need to say. They're like, oh, okay, you're legit. So
Nice.
yeah.
Nice.
So, and I'm forever in his debt for that.
Yeah, that was awesome. I saw him at the Laugh Factory in Hollywood, and he was hilarious. He was really good.
Yeah, and he's in his 80s, and he's still working on new material.
Yeah.
Always. It's crazy. The last thing I want to talk, it's the small world thing. So we have somebody in common that we know.
Yeah.
Ben Duncan. He started out here. He lived up here in northern Indiana, and he moved to Denver and became one of the people in your circle.
Yeah, hilarious comic. He shows in my book. Just as somebody that I enjoy, like anytime I see him at an open mic, it makes me happy because I know he's going to make me laugh when he gets up on stage.
Yeah.
He's a hilarious, gregarious guy, really loves comedy. I've talked to him after some sets he's done at Comedy Works, and he's just, really, his love for comedy is really special.
Mm.
Yeah, Ben Duncan's a great dude, and you sent me a note and asked if he perhaps was from Indiana, and he has bits where he talks about Indiana, so I don't know because I can't check on Facebook or anything like that. I'm not like personal close friends with him, but I do know he's told jokes about Indiana, so I'm sure it's the same Ben Duncan.
Yeah. I just think that's great. And he's a very deep intellectual guy too. I miss having him up here because he was one of those guys I had those one-on-one conversations with, and I didn't get to know him as much as I wanted to because soon after I met him, he moved to the Denver way, and so it's bittersweet, but it's really cool to have that small of a world that I stumble across you, and then it turns out we know somebody in common.
Yeah, he's doing great out in Denver. And it's funny what you said about him being smart. It's been a great revelation to me that so many comedians are so intelligent and well-read. Like, people telling poop and fart jokes 6 nights a week are some of the smartest people in any circle I've ever been in. Yeah. I'm very impressed with other stand-up comics and how cerebral they are. It's not easy to tell jokes. It takes a special kind of person. I'm still figuring it out myself. Yeah.
I've had some of my deepest conversations with comics. It's really, and that's one of the reasons I keep coming back, because you connect with people that really expand your knowledge, and also you can help them out by what you know. So it's a lot of, all of them aren't like that. Some of them are a little bit more standoffish, but the ones that you can really connect with, it's really an added benefit to doing stand-up comedy.
So a quick challenge for your listeners, Scott. I'm not on Facebook, but you can find a pretty easy way to send a note to me through my website. If you do that, and you're nice, it's the first couple of people I'll mail you an Alpaca Veil Comedy Show sticker, 3-inch die cut. They're beautiful. They're terrific. You'll want one. So send me a note, say hello, say Scott sent you, and I'll mail you a sticker. Yeah,
let me know how that goes for you. The book is called Not Good Yet by Mark Masters. You can get that directly from Mark from his website, or you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Audible, and Mark narrates it. You're a good narrator, by the way.
Thanks.
The next time we talk, I really want to...
Your book. Really, anybody out there, if they want advice, I learned a lot the hard way narrating that book. Yeah. So shoot me a note. I'd be happy to pay it forward and share that knowledge with anybody who's recording an audiobook.
Right.
It was fun, but it was also a struggle.
Mm-hmm. I just got to say, this book is great for anyone who is thinking about getting into comedy and doing the open mics, but it's also good for those of us who have been doing it, because I learned things from it, but it also it makes me understand that I have kindred spirits out there that have gone through the same things I have, and just reading the book, it brings some comfort to somebody like me too. So it's good for everybody.
Yeah, I like to tell people, even people who aren't into comedy, anybody who's into reaching for a goal or a dream, it's a good story of failure and success, and failure. But
yeah,
it's a humbling story. Have you left your review on Amazon yet, Scott?
Yeah.
I'm going to show you publicly here. You have?
I have not done the review yet, but I have clicked on the on your book page and started to do it, and then I have a real job, and I got I got interrupted. So it's going to happen.
Now, make sure you leave a review as well. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
every little bit helps.
And in the show notes, folks, I'll have a link to Mark's website, so you can go right there and get on the mailing list, which you should. And you can get his book from there. And I'll also put the Amazon link up too to make it easier, and maybe the Audible link if that works for me too. So it's all going to be there.
All right.
Mark, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Like I said, you were one of those guys that I ran across, and I'm like, this is the perfect guy for this podcast.
Terrific. Great. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good one. Holy cow, that Mark Masters interview was fantastic. I'm really glad I got a hold of him. I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. Now's the time to leave a review. You can hit me up over at iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and do that review. The reviews are important so that we can climb up the charts and people will find us and listen to us. It's also time to tell your friends. Tell your friends that the Behind the Bits podcast is something to listen to if you are into comedy. Also, follow me. Twitter, the BTBPC. That's how you find me, at the BTBPC. Facebook, Behind the Bits Podcast. Just type it in the search bar. Instagram, Behind the Bits Podcast. Just type it in the search bar. And my new YouTube channel, Behind the Bits Podcast. Just type it in the search bar. My YouTube channel has some of my comedy up there, so you can check that out and review my comedy and tell me how bad I am or how good I am. Check that out because there's going to be more content up there. Also, you can shoot me an email. If you don't want to do the social media thing, shoot me an email, scott@thebtbpc.com, if you are interested in being a guest or you just have some feedback for me. I'll take positive or negative. Thanks for listening.